Early applications of transistors. We discussed this during our 2 planning meetings. We know about UHF tuners for TVs. We know about mainframe computers. What were some of the others? And would anyone care to elaborate on those applications, computers and UHF tuners and others? How about starting with David?
Well, certainly.
Pass the mic around. Speaking.
Yes, certainly. By far the hugest applications for transistors were the replacement of vacuum tubes in computers. Initially, germanium transistors were used, and germanium transistors continue to be used for a long time, long after silicon became available, because they were much faster. And one of Herney's major contributions, other than the planar process, of course, was coming up with the gold doping process that basically killed the lifetime in the transistors. When they combined Herney's planar process with the gold dope process, with the epitaxial process that recently came out of Bell Labs, silicon transistors were finally faster than germanium. And at that point, CDC gave Fairchild a pretty big contract to develop a special gold dope transistor for them. Turned out to be the 2N709. Each CDC 6600 computer used over 600,000 transistors. And so I think Fairchild got the biggest order for transistors for just the prototype build of the CDC 6600 in the early 1960s.
Thanks
Again, a lot of it from Herney.
Bernie, give the mic to Bernie. Whoever wants to talk.
The next one was the invention of the government regulation in the early 90s of UHF television. UHF television had just about died out by 1959, because of it not being available in the tuners. So the TV sets that were being built did not have a UHF tuner. They only had a VHF tuner. So the government edicted that every television built after a certain time had to have a VHF television. I mean, a UHF television receiver as well as a VHF. So what they did is it's a single tube oscillator they put in on the opposite side where the VHF tuner was. And the problem was, in those days, many of you can remember, if your television went out, you went down with a bag of tubes to the drugstore, you plugged them in, see which one was bad, you threw it out, you got a new one, and that's how you repaired your set. So that was how TVs were repaired. But on a brand new set, when they put a tube into this particular part of the chassis, it was up in a very hot corner of this chassis, and the tube went out. And it was still under warranty. So guess what? They called the guy who sold him the television set and wanted him to come out. So he had to take the whole chassis out to replace that tube, which cost about 91 cents. So Fairchild had this new transistor, the 917, that worked perfectly well, and it didn't fail. So they decided that was the first transistor used in a television set, which is the UHF tuner, which also opened the door for Fairchild to design VHF tuners, which are much more complicated, and they put those out and showed them how they could do that with transistors to the 3 biggest suppliers, which were Zenith Radio, Standard Colesman, and General Instrument.
How about transistor radios? When I was a child growing up, my dad gave me the first transistor radio. I was living on Manhattan, Riverside Drive Park. I put it in my pocket. I went out to play all the guys, and they said, "What's that?" Wasn't transistor radios a big application of transistors?
They were germanium. They were all germanium. And they were before Fairchild was in the transistor business. They were making radios.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
And Fairchild also then got into the overseas radio market by making plastic transistors and selling them for a nickel, which were even cheaper than germanium. But the one thing that was different was that Fairchild found they could not get into the main chassis because the tube manufacturers donated the tubes just for the replacement business. So they were all free. If you were making TVs at Zenith, you paid nothing for your tubes.
Terrific.